Hello everyone, and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. Oklahoma's wheat harvest is well underway. We'll have more on that shortly, but first, the Farm Bill, which failed the House this week. Our Ag Policy Specialist, Jody Campeacci, is here now. And Jody, this news was really unexpected.
Yes, it was very unexpected. All of the major farm groups were definitely shocked by it. We were definitely expecting that it would pass the House.
And let's look at some of the reasons kind of why it got hung up. It had more to do with the nutrition program rather than the farm programs.
Yeah, probably the major issue with the Farm Bill debate right now is cuts to nutrition programs, and Congress just couldn't agree on those cuts. So it made basically the whole Farm Bill didn't end up passing because of nutrition programs.
We've talked with you a lot about the Farm Bill as it's progressed in its various forms and what some of the possibilities were. What kind of happens now? What are the possibilities now that it's failed?
Well, there are several options that could take place. We'll know more in the coming weeks, but some possibilities are the Congress could take up the bill again, possibly in the coming weeks. The Senate actually wants them to take up their bill and wants the House to go ahead and vote on the bill that they passed. It may actually end up that the House doesn't actually take this bill up again in this Congress. So there's a lot of things that could happen. There's a lot of farmers who are depending on this Farm Bill to get passed, so it's going to be interesting in what happens in the coming weeks.
Okay, and of course you'll be tracking that and come back on as warranted.
Yes.
Okay, Jody Campeacci, our Ag Policy Specialist. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Mesonet Weather Report on SUNUP. I'm your host, Gary McManus. And naturally, we're going to start by talking about drought, or the lack of drought. So let's take a look at the latest U.S. Drought Monitor map, which includes rainfall through Tuesday morning. Now, we've had steady reductions that continue from east to west across Oklahoma. Now, as you can tell from the map, we still need lots of rain across parts of western Oklahoma, and I'll show you why in a minute. But at least the areas of extreme to exceptional drought are continuing to decrease. Now, I consider the latest episode of drought relief to have begun basically right around February 1st. So let's take a look at the drought monitor map from the end of January. As you can see from this map, things look a lot worse back then, with 92% of the state covered by extreme to exceptional drought, as opposed to the 26% of the state covered by those two categories in the latest drought monitor map. So lots of relief have gone on over the last few months. Let's take a look at the Mesonet rainfall maps for several periods, and we can show you why there's no drought in the east, but still significant drought in the west. As you can see from the 30-day rainfall map from the Oklahoma Mesonet ending on Wednesday afternoon, lots of hefty rainfall amounts have led to those great drought improvements. Even parts of the Panhandle have had almost 5 inches. Parts of southwestern and north central Oklahoma still lagging behind in the last 30 days. Those are the areas that now need rain, including the Oklahoma Panhandle. Let's take a look back at the rainfall since that February 1st starting period. You can definitely see why significant drought remains across western Oklahoma and why it's been eliminated across the eastern 2/3 of the state for the most part. We have from near 30 inches in the southeast to as little as 3 inches in the Panhandle, or from 40% of normal in the Panhandle to more than 200% of normal across eastern Oklahoma since February 1st. Let's go back even further. Let's go back to the beginning of the water year, October 1st, 2012, and a very similar pattern emerges from the last period from February 1st. We have from 40 inches that has fallen across southeastern Oklahoma to as little as 5 inches in the Panhandle. That's significant drought across the Panhandle in western Oklahoma. And again, about 40% of normal across the west to more than 160% of normal in central Oklahoma since October 1st. But now the stakes have changed. We're starting to enter the long summer months of Oklahoma. We need lots of rainfall to keep up with evaporation, especially across western Oklahoma. So let's hope an unusually wet summer does occur, especially across the western third of the state. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
Oklahoma's wheat harvest is well underway, and this year, like most, is not without its share of ups and downs. Joining us now is Jeff Edwards, our small grains extension specialist. And Jeff, just kind of give us an overview.
Well, we're a pretty good ways into harvest before we got rained out recently. Southwestern Oklahoma, where we were hardest hit by the drought, that's pretty much out of the field now. Central Oklahoma, they probably had around a quarter to a third of their wheat out prior to the rain. And northern Oklahoma was really just getting started into harvest whenever we were rained out of the field. Now that things have dried up a little bit, we're going to be back in the fields, and I look for harvest to progress very rapidly now that we're back in the field.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about how things were shaping up before the rain slowed everybody down.
Well, actually, yields were turning out pretty good, better than expected. Southwestern Oklahoma, anywhere from 10 to 30 bushels per acre. Keep in mind that many acres in that part of the state were abandoned, so those are the best acres that were kept. One particular site at Apache, we had freeze injury there up to 80% and still had yields around 40 bushels per acre. It's truly amazing how that could happen. As we move into central Oklahoma, yields are a little bit better. We had a little more rainfall and yields are more in the 40, sometimes up to 50 bushels per acre range. Northern Oklahoma, I'm hearing some reports of 60 bushel yields, so better than expected.
Let's talk more about the rain, and specifically with the mature wheat like we see here. How do those heavy rains impact that wheat?
Well, one issue that we can have is lodging. So the wheat was standing upright. The rain, especially if you get a hard rain that's pounding, it'll flatten the wheat, put it flat on the ground, which it makes it harder to dry out, harder to get back in the field, and harder to pick up with the combine to harvest. The other issue that you have whenever you have rainfall after the wheat is mature is that it decreases the test weight. The wheat kernels swell, and just like trying to get something back into a package, it never shrinks back down as small as it was before. Test weight is a density measurement, so we have the same amount of material but in a slightly larger package, so test weight decreases whenever we have rain.
As part of your work, of course, you focus a lot on yields. Are there some varieties that are doing better this spring than others?
Well, we've harvested our variety plots in southwestern Oklahoma and a few in central Oklahoma. The later maturing varieties are doing a little bit better because we did have freeze injury, but there hasn't been one that's just dominated everything. Iba is one of our varieties that has done very well, later maturing variety, one of the sons of Duster that has done very well this year, and I look for it to continue to do well.
And as the fields dry out, producers getting back out there and kind of wrapping things up?
Wrapping things up, we're expecting a good week of dry weather, and if we can get that, it's amazing how quickly you can harvest 3 million acres of wheat if Mother Nature cooperates.
Close out June so everybody can take a vacation in July, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, Jeff Edwards, we'll see you again soon. Thank you.
Third week of June last year, we were talking about how the harvest was done and pretty well in the bins, but Kim, that's not the case this year.
That's correct. Wheat still in the field, running 2 to 3 weeks behind average, and 4 or 5 weeks behind last year. But it's just like prices last year were $6.60, and this year they're $7 and almost 40 cents.
So what's happening with the markets this year versus last year?
Well, we got higher prices if you compare them to last year with almost the same supply and demand situations. Projected ending stocks just slightly below average for both the U.S. and the world. We've got prices 80 cents higher than they were last year. Also, one of the surprises is that the basis where last year it was minus 30 and minus 40 cents under the July-September contracts. This year in parts of the state it's even or 7 cents less. In other words, the basis is 20 to 25 cents, maybe even 30 cents in some places higher than last year.
Okay, I'm going to ask you that question that you make all your money for. Why?
That's a $64,000 question. I think the prices are higher because our corn stocks are so tight, and we got to keep the wheat out of the feed market. The basis, it could be higher because of one, raise that cash price to keep the wheat out of the feed market in this part of the world. But also there's some new players in the market in the Oklahoma, Texas area, and there may be some increased competition. Elevators in this part of the world have one shot at getting the grain in their bin. It's at harvest, and they got to be competitive.
Okay, so does the Oklahoma farmer, do they sell or do they store?
I think the answer is yes. If you look at the difference between the September and the December contract, they're offering 15 cents to store wheat for 5 months. The cost to store wheat, about 24 cents for commercial storage, around another 6 cents or so for interest rate, so about 30 cents. They're offering half that. With the high basis, the normal basis is a minus 60 cents or 60 cents less than the current contract. It's even with it. The basis is telling, the market's begging you to sell wheat right now, but we don't know if it's going to go up $1.50 or go down $1.50. So I say sell half of it now and save the other half and store and see what happens.
That's a little different than your third, and a third.
That's a half, a fourth, and a fourth.
Kim Anderson, grain marketing specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
Now to a story about tornado cleanup and how young people who care are making a difference for farmers.
On the May 20th, tornado was about half a mile away from my house.
Connor McReynolds is from Moore, Oklahoma, the site of a devastating EF5 tornado in mid-May. But today, Connor is 30 miles northwest of his home, cleaning up damage from the May 31st tornado that ripped through Canadian County.
That evening, it was the biggest wall cloud I've ever seen in my life. It seemed to encompass a third of the whole county.
The tornado was the broadest recorded in North America at over 2.6 miles wide. Wind speeds reached 296 miles per hour, devastating homes, businesses, and agricultural land, including Jerry Lingo's canola crop.
It was about shoulder high before the tornado came through and basically just laid it straight on the ground and knocked a lot of the seeds out on the ground, shattered a lot of the pods, and just pretty well made it, with all the trash that's in it, made it pretty well unharvestable.
Agriculture damage was in a path, mainly in a path of that storm and where the wind carried debris. If you were in that 2.6 mile swath, it's devastating, just like the field we're standing in of canola that just got blew away. The first thing that's going to happen when you come in with the combine is you're going to hear a horrible rattle in that combine cylinder. And you hope you can get it shut down to limit the damage. It only takes that one piece of debris to get in a piece of operating harvesting equipment, and you've got more money tied up in repairs than the crop will ever be worth.
That is why volunteers like Connor McReynolds make such a difference.
Makes me feel like I'm helping people who just had their houses gone. This is the only way they can make the money to rebuild their homes.
Well, we have a bunch of youth from all across the state of Oklahoma today through the United Methodist Church cleaning fields here for farmers. This is an alfalfa field they've been working on. We just have to walk through the fields, pick up all the debris, insulation, shingles, metal.
This is just be my 6th or 7th field. And yesterday we found part of a tractor trailer out in the field, so it was pretty heavy to move.
But it isn't just the big debris. The little stuff is often important too.
Yeah, it's a picture of a man and 2 ladies. Could be sisters, wife. But we'll hold on to it, try to get it to its owner.
It's pretty humbling how many people just show up that not even from this state, don't have anything to do with you or the crop, and they're just willing to come out and spend a day picking up trash.
A lot of these farmers had houses destroyed. This is the last thing on their minds, picking debris up. And that's the heartfelt thanks that those farmers have for these volunteers, is that somebody's helping me, and that's one less worry I have to worry about is debris in my fields.
Still, with so much of the debris hidden beneath a tangled mat of plant material, this is just the first step of cleanup.
Probably we'll see some fires through some of this area to expose the debris field and be able to get it completely cleaned up.
Basically walk it again, pick it up, and hope we don't have a bunch of flats from all the nails. We'll come back in with wheat, and it's kind of like farmers always say, hope next year's better.
A goal that is a little easier to achieve thanks to so many willing volunteers. For SUNUP, I'm Austin Moore.
Producers that have fall-born heifers that they're going to use for replacements have those heifers either recently weaned or they will be very soon will be weaned. We need to, of course, keep those heifers gaining as we go into the late summer, fall, and then towards the breeding season next November. Those heifers need to gain someplace between 1 1/3 and 1 1/2 pounds per head per day between now and when they start that first breeding season. While they're on really green, lush native grass or Bermuda grass at this time of the year, they're receiving enough protein and energy to do that and meet those needs. But as we go into later summer, July, August, and September, and those grasses become dry, they start to reach maturity, they will lose protein. And that's a time then when supplementation of those replacement heifers becomes very, very important. A good concept to consider is what we call the Oklahoma Gold supplement. That's where we use a small package of a high protein supplement, something that's 38 to 45% crude protein, generally fed in the neighborhood of about 1 1/2 to 2 pounds per head per day. That should provide the additional protein that those young heifers need in order to achieve that 1 1/2 pounds average daily gain that we're after. If we have some heifers that we think are a little bit too light, or we're concerned as to whether we have enough pasture in order to meet the energy needs of those heifers, then we might use a different supplementation program. This one's called Super Gold. And what it is feeding 3 pounds, or about twice as much as what we talked about before, of a lower protein supplement, generally something in the neighborhood of 25% crude protein. That should really be helpful for those young replacement heifers that need a little extra boost to make sure that they're big enough. They want to be 65% of their mature weight as they start that breeding season next fall, and that will give us the best chance to have a high percentage of those heifers bred in the upcoming breeding season so we can get those heifers off to a good start to match the rest of our cow herd. We hope that this helps you with your summer supplementation ideas for those fall-born replacement heifers, and we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
Joining us now to talk about the latest in the livestock markets, Darrell Peel, our livestock marketing specialist here at Oklahoma State. Darrell, let's start today talking about the imports. What's happening in those markets?
You know, beef imports into the U.S. are up a little bit this year. We expected that. Again, we have high prices in the U.S. and that attracts more product into the U.S. market. It depends on exchange rates, but it's a bit of a mixed bag when you look at the major sources of imports. Australia is one of those. We're actually getting less meat so far this year from Australia and from Canada, which is also one of our major sources of imports. On the other hand, New Zealand is up in terms of the amount of meat coming into the U.S. from New Zealand, and Mexico, who is a newcomer on the block as a source of beef imports, is up again this year after having grown dramatically in the last 3 years.
All right, so then let's talk about the export side of things. How's that working?
Exports are down a little bit, again, and as expected, because prices are high here. We had very strong growth in 2010 and 2011 that was not likely to continue, and we're seeing that now. So we've dropped off a little bit, but again, it's a mixed bag when you look at the major markets. Japan is actually up nicely, and as we know, Japan changed their regulations earlier this year to accept meat from animals under 30 months of age. On the other hand, Russia has been a very strong market for us the last 2 or 3 years, and currently we're sending no product to Russia because they have a ban on ractopamine, and so that's an issue that's being worked on there. Exports are down to Mexico, which is also one of our major markets, but up a little bit to Canada at the same time.
All right, now in both of those you mentioned Canada and Mexico, which are both importers and exporters for us. Talk about that dynamic and how does we relate to that?
You know, what it really illustrates more than anything else, 2 things, I guess. One is that we really have a North American market, and it makes no sense really to think of it as 3 separate markets. They're very well integrated, more so all the time. The other thing is beef is not one thing. It's many different products, and so the trade that we have with Canada and Mexico in particular illustrates the fact that we're sorting out different products going to different markets. Some of it's due to geography, if you will, transportation costs, but also just different products and
the values they have in the different countries. And again, it's a continual evolution in those markets to become more integrated as a North American market.
All right, now we've talked there about all the meat side of things. What's happening in the live cattle markets?
The live cattle trade in North America is also very important with Canada and Mexico and the U.S. You know, the last 2 years we have imported near record levels of cattle from Mexico, partly because of prices here, but also because they've been affected by a drought, much as the U.S. has. Those levels were not sustainable, and they did drop off at the end of 2012, and so far in 2013 we're running down over 40% from a year ago. So we'll probably end up the year with 50 to maybe 60% of last year's level of cattle imports from Mexico. On the Canadian side, we're getting a few more feeder cattle in the early part of the year, though that may be dropping off here. And we're also getting more cattle that are coming in directly to go to slaughter. Part of that increase is due to the fact that we're importing more cull cows going to slaughter, because about a year ago a major cow killing plant in eastern Canada closed, and many of those dairy cows are now coming down to the U.S. live rather than before they were coming down already processed into meat.
All right, good information as always. Darrell Peel, Livestock Marketing Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
Hi, welcome to Shop Stop. Today we want to talk a little bit about some jumper cables and a little device that might make them a little easier to use if you're jumping all the time.
So one thing about jumper cables is, of course, gauge size plays a big part, because the smaller the gauge, the larger the wire. The larger the wire, the more current it can carry, and that, the largest wire you can get or afford is going to be the best deal. Now, to connect them, there's some simple ways to do that.
Yeah, usually, I mean, you know, we're all accustomed to, you got to pop the hood on your vehicle, attach it to the battery, or maybe there's connection points that are in the vehicle for jumping. But there's also, you can get a quick connect. So if you are, you know, having to jump a tractor or irrigation engines or things like that all the time, you can put it in there and just plug into it.
Right, and it's a quick connect, and you can get that at your local parts supply house, and it just basically is a simple connection, and it's real easy to use, and it keeps you from having to mess with the cables so much.
So, that's a tip on jumper cables this week on Shop Stop. We'll see you next week.
Talking cattle now, and a look at how science and industry are coming together to set the agenda for beef genetics. Downtown Oklahoma City recently hosted some of the top minds in beef breeding and genetics, the members of the Beef Improvement Federation.
But we have, over the years, coming up on 50 years, having developed the evaluation tools that are used throughout the beef industry. In particular, let's just say the EPDs, expected progeny differences, those all originated with BIF.
This group was solely responsible for standardizing all performance records across breeds and nationally and internationally. Now it's uniform across breeds, where in the early 50s it was just this breed did it one way, another breed did it another way, and so now everybody's on the same page.
The Federation was founded in 1968 and has been meeting each year to guide the efforts of research and industry. And this year, 500 people attended.
We get people from all over, but in a perfect world, we'd like to have it somewhere where we can get people that can come in and that are making their living as a cow-calf or possibly a seed stock operator, and figure out how to be able to make more money from their operation, so that, like in my case, so that you got a way to figure out how to keep the family farm, because we're not in an easy business.
A lot of the speakers had kind of a look ahead to the future, whether it was regarding genetic defects and how we might use genomic sequencing to address those, as well as how we might use something like metagenomics to impact cattle production.
In the hallways, we have long breaks, usually maybe 30 minutes between the general sessions and going into these smaller, more intensive sessions, so that the local cattle people literally will mix and mingle with the researchers and the academics, and you find that it's equal interest to both parties to hear about what the other one's doing.
It gets science back down to the producer. So we have a lot of interaction from, it's one of those meetings that there is, I don't believe in a meeting like this that we have the interaction between producers and the scientific community where we can sit down and solve problems.
So one of the neat things about these discussions is that many times they can lead to a new research direction and research projects that we can hear about in future BIF meetings, as well as other conferences and in scientific publications.
We as an industry have to make the best possible beef eating experience. That's where it's at, in my opinion. So everything I'm focused on is to help everybody understand the connection and everybody work towards the same goal.
If you'd like to learn more about the Beef Improvement Federation, visit our website, sunup.okstate.edu. That'll do it for us this week. Remember, you can find us anytime at sunup.okstate.edu. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. I'm Lyndall Stout. We'll have more on wheat harvest next week on SUNUP. See you then.